Oh, thank you. It's like 30 in the low 30s right now.
Wow. Good day. Good day. This is Tim Jerome. I'm working with Kumar Pushpak, CEO of Ajona Services and Ajona Academy. And I want to welcome you here. Today we have our favorite guest of the month. Hi, Mark Gorkin. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm dressed up and warmly because we've got it's beautiful. Actually, it's a beautiful morning and the wind has finally subsided. So I'm good to go. I'm
Great. Yeah, actually, we're unseasonably warm. I unpacked, we had a snow that we'd never have early, and then it got warm, and it's been warm for a couple weeks, and it's going to be warm for a couple more weeks. So the climate is definitely out of control in our part of the world. But it's still a beautiful day. Good day for a walk and good day for bundling up. I can't wait to pull out my sweaters like you are, though. Yeah, that's very dashing. Let's see here today. We had a very good conversation last week. We've been talking about a couple items. One of the big items we've been talking about is the fact that we are in the second wave. We're in a whole time of doubt and confusion that we're frustrated with. And one of the things that Kumar and I have been talking about is how do I actually consider or how do I prepare to reopen my business in the middle of this nonsense? Now, let me give you a little context, okay, Mark?
sure.
Um, I've been listening to my governor here in the great Southwest, right? We're in New Mexico, and my governor said, we're not getting a lot of data from the federal level, but a bunch of us governors got together and we're collecting our own data and we're actually starting to look at our tracking activities. And we found things that are causing the massive breakouts in our state. Now, when I say massive, let me just take New Mexico, okay? Well, we were doing fine. We're running 75 to 85% capacity in our hospitals, okay? We're just barely on the edge and we're able to maintain. Even we have, what is it? We have 17 to 19 American Indian communities here too. And we've been working with those national groups as well. And we've been doing all right. And then comes Arizona and Texas. And it's not that we're running out of rooms in hospitals. That capacity is not a problem anyway. The National Guard is able to set up facilities for us on a moment's notice. They're beautiful here. We're working like a well-tuned machine together locally. The problem is doctors and nurses, and they've been doing this wonderful work since March, and it's working high Aganse, and we don't know how, but we're getting a lot of overflow from El Paso. And we're getting some overflow from Arizona. And so we're moving these poor people around and they're going from crisis to crisis. It's almost like a mobile military unit where the facilities stay the same and the people move around wherever we have breakouts. And so they've been focusing on breakouts. And she came on the news last Thursday and said, guys, we're locking down, but we're locking down in very specific areas. Hi, Aganse. The problem is we're having breakouts because of restaurant gatherings and small home gatherings. And so they're actually controlling us in very specific manner. It's very surgical. lockdown, okay, and it's going to be for 2 weeks, but the problem is it's broken our spirit because it's right across one of our great holidays here in the US, Thanksgiving, and we're very frustrated. And Kumar was going through Diwali this last week, and Diwali was wonderful, but at the same time it was very subdued. And he's thinking, I'm opening up the store and we're having problems with our disease going up and down, and we may have a vaccine, but the vaccines are going to be good for about 6 months. So how do I create this sense that people can come in and things are going to be all right, and no matter what happens in the next few months, that the store is going to remain open, and everything's going to be stable, and everything's going to be happy. When we go home and we have to do the same thing to our families, we're creating this sense of emotional continuity, and as leaders and business owners, we're on the edge of the knife, because we have that, but we have the real reality that we have to keep the businesses going. We have to keep the revenue going. So how do I do this? And that's the big question mark.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I run a group for seniors, a support group of Unitarian seniors, and one of the women was I guess born in London, I think. Um, anyway, she was reflecting, talking about COVID, but was reflecting on what the people that lived in London during World War II, and with the bombing of Germany, what they had to not just go through, but how they had to adapt. You're saying, and we all are saying, is how do we find some normalcy within this, uh, you know, invisible enemy, and this this kind of new war we're facing. And I think there's something to that. That is, you're going to able to achieve a normalcy, but you know what? It's not quite normal when every once in a while you hear a siren go off and you got to scurry into the basement of some building because
Yeah, and it's funny because my mother-in-law was in Upper England in World War II, and she was a young girl. She was 8 or 9, and she had these stories as well, and and being a child in that age, and this is the only thing Um, humans are amazing, and this is normal. And we're constantly talking about this new normal. But the problem is, we know we want to be back to what we used to think as normal. And that's the crux of the issue.
and that's where I'm saying that is at some point the folks in England realized I have to carve a life despite the fact that there's enemy incoming, you know, on a moment's notice. Um, so, in a way, I think what Kumar is asking is, how can I get get this, the office open, bring people back, and also help the people talk about that. It isn't exactly it's not going to be what it was previously, and it's really going to take a lot of, as you and I have talked about, a lot of real good communication. Uh, the leader, I think, the most important thing a leader can do is be a role model for open communication. I really, it really gives off a message. I really want to hear what your ideas, thoughts, feelings, and fears what's going on, you know, with you as individuals, with you as, teams, groups, because we're going to have to figure this out together. And the more, I remember a commander at Fort Hood told me, Mark, it's easy to order people around. The real trick is, how do you create buy-in? And that's, and what he talked about is that when I have a chance, I have meetings where I do most of the listening, and I want everybody else to do the talking. Because not only am I going to finally really learn what's going on in the trenches if I shut up and listen, especially to the people who are in the trenches, but people are going to say, hey, Commander Phelps really seems interested in me and my ideas and what I'm concerned about. He's beginning to know me. And if he does that and he knows me, I can begin to trust him. And so in a crisis, when I really have to listen to Commander Phelps's directive, I believe it. I believe him because he knows me. I've gotten to know him, and I'm ready to, walk his path. And that's the challenge, I think. One of the biggest challenges is how, as leaders, we not be afraid. What we perhaps have to really model is not be afraid to really explore together a way of coming up with a structure that works for all of us.
Yes. That brings us to a topic that you were talking about just a second ago. And by the way, good day, Aganze. I have a question from Aganze, and we'll respond to it. But I want to give him a voice here.
Okay, sure.
Aganze is reaching out from Africa and saying, Aganze wants to know about the impact on international development aid, which is also an impact on and through American New Office politics for Africa. And Aganze, there's two things I can share with you, and I'll do it. I'll reserve 5 or 10 minutes at the end of this call to actually tell you two things. Because we have a political transition that's in process, and I can give you an update on that. And also what's happening on boots on the ground, because, Mark, I was part of a national webinar on the National Coalition of Nurses yesterday, and they were talking about the status of the vaccines and where the vaccines are. So I can answer Aganze's question from two perspectives, and this will be interesting for you and the rest of our audience as well. So you're right. You're right. And the problem with a leader is we forget that the leader is the first person who jumps into the door and protects the rest of the people with a shield as they're going in. So there's this sense of risk and sacrifice when you're doing the role of the leader well. And that's one of the things, if you are trying to do this business right now, you're actually not just helping your group, the people who are going to help you keep the doors open, but you have that self-care that you have to have in place, and along with the understanding of sacrifice. One of the things that you and I have talked about throughout this discussion is, talking and number one, sharing fears, and number two, sharing where we are in a realistic standpoint, being terribly transparent. And notice that I'm using the word we. And from a business perspective, that's where we're looking at. Where are we going with this? How long are we going to keep our doors open? And it's a unique opportunity as well, because if we do go into the office, Just like here in New Mexico, we're going to be locking down in a moment's notice. And we're going to have to create an emotional and a professional environment so that it's almost very consistent that the team is going to be the team, the business is going to be the business, and we're going to be able to work very consistently that way. Excellent, Aganse. Yeah, I'm very familiar with your work environment. I actually worked in Africa and throughout Africa in the 2000s. So, Mark, getting back to what we're talking about, um, so what do you recommend? How do you set up? I know how we're going to set up the logistics of offices and logistics and make sure people feel comfortable they can go back in the office. It's the distancing, it's the hand washing, and it's talking about it, and it's making it like it's normal. We're going to talk about hand washing, we're going to talk about these things and make sure that there's you mentioned, and I thought it was really nice in one of our talks here in this last week. You mentioned having an all hands on deck the moment you walk into an office. Could you elaborate on this all hands on deck concept?
Well, it's getting everyone together. Clearly, it's that all hands on deck is initiated by the leader, really giving her or his, vision of how we want to begin this, reentry process. Um, Perhaps the leader has met a little bit beforehand, maybe before the all hands with his or her managers to, kind of give them a heads up to get their input. But it's not like you're going to have an absolutely elaborate, well-defined roadmap, because that's exactly what you don't want to do. You don't want to just make it, here's what we're going to do, boom, boom, boom. I have all your interests in heart. I know what's good for everybody. That's exactly what you don't want to do. What you want to say is, I really want to get as much input, diverse input, so I can really have a better understanding of where we're coming from. Because you know what? Not everybody has the exact same emotional reaction to this whole COVID thing. Some people are quite fearful. Other people are, I want to kind of check it out a little bit, more. So you've got different reactions. There isn't one size fits all. And that's where you want to get as much input, give people everyone should have a chance to, really talk about how they're feeling about coming back to work. Maybe even what was their experience while they were home? What was positive about being home? What was not so positive about being home? We know research is telling us that long distance working over time, creates a lot of creates its own frustrations and sense of isolation, burnout, feeling disconnected. So everyone is coming with real experience. There should be some opportunity to sort of let people, maybe in smaller groups, but talk about what's been my experience the last 6 months. Where am I coming from, or where am I, in terms of my own psychological space as I'm coming back to work. Some of us have been able to cope with this working at home a little bit better than others. And I'm not saying that but maybe we can also, by having both the all hands meeting and then breaking down into smaller groups, really begin to share with one another what's been working, what hasn't been working. so we can really learn from one another. And that's the key. You know, I did I was also on a podcast yesterday. We were talking about natural disasters, and a friend, the woman who was running, with me, who was running the podcast, lives in Oregon. She was living about 45 minutes outside of Eugene, and her family home that they've had for about 50 years was totally destroyed in the fires. You know, wiped out. The whole town was wiped out. The whole little community was wiped out. And she's an LA girl, so she's used to big city kind of. She said she never was in a community like this where people just came together, really worked together as help rebuild, start rebuilding places, really looking out for each other, really having each other's back. She said it was just the most beautiful thing that she's ever experienced. So how do we create in this crisis a recognition that we really can pitch in and help one another to a degree that we're not used to? Go, Tim.
So this is interesting. Talking about my governor again. We think that if you're the leader, you have to be the strong one, and you have to be the one that says, "I'm not afraid." But it was interesting. Our governor started off saying, "I'm afraid just like you."
Right. That's beautiful.
But she said two more things. She said, number one, I'm getting together with a lot of my peers, and we're going to actually be working together at our level, and we're finding new ways, and we're bringing it together to each other so that we can actually respond in the best way moving forward. They're sharing information. That gave me a little more confidence. Oh, okay, Aganze. Yeah. There is that fear, and we'll talk about this. That I understand what you're saying. I want to, Aganze, I want to give you a little perspective on that too. So we will reserve this. This is an interesting topic, and I have not forgotten your topics. But yeah, we will talk about that. So Mark, one of the things that I realized was, number one, we have total visibility in the communication, total sharing of humanity and emotions. I'm a human being like you. I'm scared. And I'm working together. I'm not in isolation, as you and I are not in isolation. And here's the best way for us to do it. And we will make the changes as we go along. And what you're saying, Mark, is also the leader listening. You're the one who actually speaks the last. Everybody thinks the leader talks, but if you observe the real good leaders, they're usually the last person to talk.
Or if they're talking, they're asking what I call good questions. And I want to emphasize this because I think you're right on target, Tim. I call that there are two pillars to asking a good question. The first pillar is sort of the humility pillar. I don't have all the answers. The second pillar is the openness pillar. I really would like to hear your perspective on things. And when you ask questions with those, points in mind, do you think people appreciate them when you approach them with humility and openness? Boy, that's a no-brainer. So that's the key. Can you ask questions that really, a lot of times, and I bet you know it in your class as a professor, people will say something, and everybody just, okay, yeah, You know what? Wait a second. I think there's more there. I want to understand what you're saying on a deeper level. I'm not trying to catch you. I want to really get you.
Right, right. And it's the people with the questions and the comments that actually sideline you as a good teacher that are the ones that are telling you, maybe these students don't need exactly what I'm teaching. Maybe these students need something else.
But you're right, because asking good questions means you can get feedback and data that you didn't normally wouldn't get. You know, see, that's the other thing I think. One of the things we're going to need to make this whole new transition work from leader to, you know, boots on the ground folks is new communication skills. You know, we're asking people to, you're saying we all need to be transparent. You know what? I grew up in a family where it said, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. What the hell are you talking about? Be transparent.
Yeah, let me give you a story.
Yeah.
So I was part of a consulting group inside of a major corporation. They were manufacturing and they were trying this with 300 employees, right? And Aganse, you'll appreciate this. The corporation was just like your family. No communication, no interaction. They just created us in a bubble and said, do your thing and come back to us. And it lasted for about 7.5 years. It was a wonderful experience. We, inside of our 300 people bubble, had a great leader. And near the end, my leader came back and said, I don't know if we're going to have jobs. I'm scared, but you know what? I've seen other people go through this inside the corporation. And here's what the corporation is going to do, I think. And if I hear any information, I'll be sharing it with you quickly so that you and I can actually launch this and use this to propel us forward instead of, catching us unaware. So, good leadership really worked. And he went on and he left the company and he's locally here in local government and he does the same thing. And he's always going to be a shining star wherever he is because he takes care of the people like you're talking about. And he does it in a humanistic model. Now, the corporation is going off on its own. And I've been observing that. And you can tell the impact of the culture when you isolate the people from the communication and the information. And Aganse, this is what you're talking about with your lack of trust, and this is what happens when the real story is not being shared. And this is one of the fears that we have here in our country. The media has been used as a political tool to control or potentially or to attempt to control the interest and the focus and the desires of the people. And we're uncomfortable with that. We all went to school. We all have a certain level of education and knowledge that says, no, this is not the way people function. And it doesn't feel comfortable. So my manager said this is the way some people are, and some people are in leadership, and we just have to work around it. So what do? We create our little bubbles. Instead of having the community open, we may have a little bubble, and we'll have that bubble extend its influence as far as possible. And if it's not that bubble, we'll gather two or three. As long as two or three have each other's backs, we'll work together to the extent we can. And that was my introduction to this concept of you have a community, you have groups, and you have an individual. And building this is not a leader setting out to build a foundation or build brick or mortar. Having a leader is somebody who gathers smart, expert people that the leader's going to have to run to keep up with, and keeping them safe and as comfortable as they can as they're creating the great new ideas. It's a dynamic that is really different than what most people would think what management and leadership is. And we've been doing this for thousands of years. That's the key. We have documentation. We have historical knowledge, and we're genetically manufactured for this too, that a leader comes in and says, guys, the weather's bad. Things are knocking at the door. But if we work together, you're good with wood, you're good with leather, you're fast, you have good eyesight. Let's figure out how we can get together. And with our smarts, with our general skills on top of our specific skills, let's see how far we can keep this game going. And that's, if, to your social and your emotional perspective, this is the way I see entering into this new phase of how do I manage and respond to these ebbs and waves of an epidemic. And I've, how many epidemics have we gone through in Western civilization? 15, 18 that we can document. It's there, and we know how to do this. In fact, we know better now than ever before. We've been working with this, and we need to work at this at a more general level.
Well, but let's also acknowledge the challenge. For example, something that, depending on what part of the country, seems like an easy answer, and yet we can't come up with a unified approach to, let's say, wearing masks. Some parts of the country, no, hell no, I don't want to be told to wear a mask. Other parts of the country, hey, this is what we're going to do to, we believe this is going to reduce the likelihood of infection. The other one part of the country says, hey, I don't want my liberty, trod upon. And the other part of the country says, I don't want my safety trod upon. And so how do you begin to, create a dialogue so that there can be some sense of, consensus, something that works for all of us? And it's, again, what you were talking about. We have the scientific perspective, and then we have the economic perspective. Can we keep things open until we can't? And if we can keep things open, can we do it in a smart way? And so, again, it's going to really take people thinking not just about themselves. It becomes a little, we can get a little selfish. It's all about me, or it's my liberty, or it's my safety. There's got to be a way, and the only way I know about is let people have some conflict, talk it out, have a good fight, and then in that, because a lot of times what people are really saying is, I want the freedom to decide. I might even be willing to agree with you, but I've got to feel first. I can say, I don't like what you're saying, or I don't agree with it. And once I've established my freedom to do that, now I'm willing to be a little bit more open-minded. So we've got to give people a chance to sort of, to say where they're coming from before you can ask them to see the bigger picture or create a bigger picture.
And from the big picture perspective, it's understanding that ideologies, mindsets, perspectives, decisions, they may be good or bad. Okay? They may actually help us in figuring out how to manage our personal lives better. We can have more than 8 people at Thanksgiving. Right now, we're by order, by government order, we can only have 4 or 5 people together in a house in Thanksgiving. And I don't like it. Nobody likes it. But the thing is, the ideology is not the person. And you're exactly right, Mark. We have to have voices. Mark has to have a voice. Tim has to have a voice. Aganze has to have a voice. We have to be able to say, I don't like this. And that's the job of a leader, to allow people to say, I don't like this, in a manner such that people don't lose their sense of personal value. And by having them participate in this shared emotional, I don't like this, as a group, and then have that connected, we can actually then start saying, okay, we don't like this, we agree. And there are parts of us going in this direction, part of us going in this direction. Let's actually explore these directions, see which one's better.
Somehow, it just evoked a memory of one of the most dramatic organizational interventions I was involved with. And it was in the early 90s. It was with the Department of, a division in the Department of Transportation. It was the map making division. These mostly men, mostly white men, had developed years of incredible skill making these incredibly detailed maps, for government agencies, for, certain kind of air systems, by hand. By hand. It was unbelievable, the detail and the precision, skills developed over decades. But what's happening in the early 90s? One change is the government is starting to bring in minorities, women, who are consciously trying to diversify. And much like an invading COVID virus, suddenly computer graphics,
Automation, yeah.
digital automation and digital technology is coming in. And suddenly, these men are scared. And what begins to happen? It's almost predictable. Suddenly, people are pulling up KKK websites.
Mm-hmm.
And other people are bringing in Louis Farrakhan tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And people are starting to sue the government. Suddenly, they're hemorrhaging thousands of dollars already. And someone, who was involved with this group, and they're going crazy. What do we do with this? This is somehow heard about me, said, okay, let's bring in the stress doc. And there were 60 people in the division. We wound up having 2 one-day seminars for 30, divided the group into 2 groups of 30. And as we talked, it became clear what was really not being addressed and talked about was the fear and the sense of loss, out of being out of control. Things were happening that, weren't the fault of the new people coming in. It was just like a wave of virus. There was a wave of technology that was disrupting the whole work world. And once they could get past their anger and talk about their fear and their sense of loss, and the new people could understand that these people weren't, pulling up KKK websites because they're totally racist and hateful. No, they were scared shit, as I can use my French. And they were frightened, and they felt they were being replaced and displaced and not being appreciated for all the work and the contribution that they had made. And at the same time, they could understand a little better once they got their anger and fear out, that the people coming in weren't, their enemies. There's had to be a way that we can work together. Or what a number of those older men decided is maybe it's time for me to retire and to move on and to accept the reality that I'm going to have to make a new life change, because I'm not going to be able to pick up the digital technology as quickly and as agilely as some of these younger people who've been trained on it for years. So it was a profound, profound experience. And the manager who brought me in reminds me, Mark, you saved the federal government hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in lawsuits, because the lawsuits stopped. Once we got people really talking with each other and recognizing each other's fears and perspective, and they stopped demonizing each other. And there's something in that that's very profound, and certainly has application for today's crisis. This is going to be a scary time, and there are going to be people, hell no, I'm not going in, and they're going to say, but some of those people are going to have to go in, and they're going to be angry. Why are you making me come in? You're threatening my life. And we're going to have people, we're going to have create an environment where people talk about their fear and stop demonizing one another and begin to see, what are the connections? What are the human connections? What are the communal connections?
Aganze uses the word human dignity and personal value. And you're right, Aganze. Personal value is the foundation of human dignity. Integrity is really an interesting word too. Integrity comes from the Latin word, integer, integral, bringing it together. And it's being unified and whole. Integrity is being unified and whole in your message, in your personal life. I have one thing to tell people. We use similar words: authentic, real. We use this sense that we take our masks off. We are a whole unified being. And in my classes, we teach this as, I'm the same person to you that I am to you. You may not like what I say, but I'm going to give you the truth. We'll talk more about this in just a second, Aganze, and you're right. There is, and it's not just now, Aganze. There is a sense that there is another type of leadership that says, if I control the message, I control the people. But it's a false sense of control. In the end, it feels like a sense of manipulation because it's not real. The real sense of control is where the leader actually says, we're in this together. It's where the leader also admits that there's no such thing as total control, and things may go in a different direction that we may think. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and like in the story that I just was sharing, the best thing the leaders could do is they realized they had a situation on their hands that they did not know how to really engage with in a constructive way, and they weren't too proud to ask for outside help. And I think that's also very important. A leader not only doesn't, necessarily have all the answers, but is he or she willing to invite others into the process to maybe provide skills? Like they needed someone who understood stress, who understood crisis, who understood emotional fear, who really understood, how anger can be a cover for a sense of, helplessness and feeling powerless. They needed someone to address a psychological breadth and depth that they weren't trained as leaders to have. They didn't have years of psychotherapy, years of, you know, uh, clinical study. So of course they had to call on, or they didn't have to, but they chose to wisely call on someone with those skills, and that's also part of leadership, and very much what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Tim.
creating an environment where people can express themselves and be relaxed and comfortable. It's the physical safety as we started off with, but it's also emotional safety. That knowing that the world is going to change, and it is. Weather's going to change, climate's going to change, everything. And it's the ability to actually clear a safe place where we can voice our concerns. And at the same time, we can bring in these experts that have our sense, and we can solve this, where the leader's job is to create that bubble of safety.
As you say, bubble of safety, bubble of expertise, and bubble of listening, and bubble of real dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me actually diverge from this conversation, because Aganze, I think this would actually help you. Let me tell you what's happening here in the United States. We're having a political transition. And it's very obvious that it's making some people feel very uncomfortable. And that transition is being manipulated by not just one side, but multiple sides. And the same thing is happening in India. I'm talking with Kumar Pushpak on a regular basis. And it's being manipulated for certain ends or objectives in political agenda. And the problem is, the people's needs are not going to be met. Going back thousands of years, if you don't take care of the people, they're not going to stick around. And what I'm trying to watch for, and you're going to see me looking at this and talking about this over the next few months or years, is finding the places on our planets where we have mass movement of people. This is the next sign that we have changes in our society, Mark. And you know me, I've been studying this for a few years. I've been observing like 12 different metrics that say society is changing, and the next change in society is mass movement of humanity. We had a little bit of that in Europe. Just a few years ago, moving from the Eastern Bloc to the Western Bloc, we have Poland and the other European movements, and the people were not being served. The people were not being supported, and people are going to move, and they are going to risk their health and their lives and the future of their families for this sense of safety. Now, in the United States, we have people who have been talking about, and they've been on the local news for weeks and months, that they don't feel safe in California. And so they're starting to move east, which is interesting. And I'm looking at mass migration of people in the United States. Isn't that interesting? Because that we feel we're not emotionally and physically safe. And we need to create that. Now, there are signs in our federal government that say that we are creating this sense of safety and continuity. And we're going to spread this as quickly as we can over the next few months. And there are mending bridges between the United States and the rest of the world so we can get back to sharing this communication. Now, in the spirit of this, Aganze, we're very hopeful and we're very optimistic right now here at this time. This is a time of transition. And it's like I'm a child sitting in church and I have to sit in my hands for another hour before dinner. But that's the sense of the political environment that we have right now. Now, let me talk to you about what these nurses were saying and what this whole organization of health was saying. It was beautiful because these people have visibility into the data and into the progress of vaccines and how we're taking care of this and what we're looking at. They looked at three things and they did exactly what you're talking about, Mark. They said, I'm scared just like you. I don't know all the answers, but we got together and we have different skill sets. And it seems that we agree this is the best way forward. And we're going to continue to talk and we're going to figure this out. And we invite other groups to actually stay in communication with us. So Oganze, that's almost like us on this show saying, as long as we talk, as long as we share information, we can actually look at the most successful ways of solving these problems. And we can all learn from each other and move forward in a better manner. And that's what we've been promoting here. The data here and the results say that we have like 2 to 3 vaccines that are ready to be released, and testing has already started, and they seem to be very, very effective, not against getting the disease, but managing the disease. Okay. It's basically like a regular flu shot. And like regular flu shots, they were very careful to say this. It's not going to make the flu go away. And people are going to have to get this flu shot on a regular basis because the immunization only lasts like 5 to 6 months. It's going to be something that we do just like other flu viruses once a year. And that'll actually keep us. But they said, this whole sense of staying at a distance from each other and washing your hands and wearing masks, this may be a part of our culture moving forward. And the parts of the world that have done this best are Malaysia, South Korea, and the most strenuously controlled cultures. But the very best has been South Korea, and they were smart. Okay, they actually used their understanding of humans. They did not sell masks to people like you and me, Mark. They sold masks to the kids in the schools, and they sold them as accessories and bangles and bracelets, and the kids were having competitions to see who had the fanciest and who was able to do that. And all of a sudden these masks were not a hindrance, they were an accentuator of my personal identification. And these are the people who are really smart. And this is what I'm looking for. Not people who lock things down, but people who open things up for this innovation and they trust. This is the hard one.
That's going to be, and that's universal.
Yeah.
How do we reframe, or how do we get another perspective, as you said, seeing it more as an identifying accessory as opposed to a mandatory, I've got to do this because it's good for me, or someone else is telling me that I have to do this to be responsible.
You have to do this. And it's funny, Aganse, barriers. the way you use barriers. We have to live with COVID-19, becoming accustomed with barrier measures. It's funny, Aganse. I've noticed something in communities here locally. Communities have fences, and houses around here have fences, and fences limit our ability to walk and move. But the trick is that some people have used the fences to express their humanity, where other people have used their fences to limit. And I don't think it's the barriers that are the consideration. I think there's a better way for us to work. The communities where we share the decoration around the barriers and in spite of the barriers is where we can actually maintain this cohesiveness. It retains that us and we. One of the biggest fears we have as human beings right now is us and them. And this big them is one of the biggest monsters that we're all scared of. Them is going to keep me in my house and away from my friends. Them is going to tell me I can't have a big party on Thanksgiving. And the thing is, if we can actually have an us and a we, like my governor did last Thursday, I think we can stand a better chance. Now, what can we do today? Well, as business owners, we can have this discussion of us and we in the bubbles that we control. And we can do it, and we can participate in the bubbles we find. You talk a lot about finding the people that you can lean on, your crew, your mentors, and your trusted people. And we stay in touch with those small groups, and the groups can have a cohesive we, and we can find those aspects of the communities with the healthy leadership, and we as groups can participate in the community we. And that way, I think, number one, our personal health can actually take a shot of positive vaccination, but it also transfers back to the people in our care as well.
As you're talking, Tim, I'm thinking of how there was a study done when they broke up Ma Bell in the 80s. It's a long time ago, but
yeah,
they did a study of executives, and there were some that were really having a hard time, and then there were others that seemed to managing, this organizational restructuring, downsizing, flip sizing. I mean, everything was being turned upside down. And she found this, Dr. Suzanne Cabasa, researcher, found that there were 4 factors. And, being the word artist, I came up with the 4 C's of psychological hardiness. And the first was, most hardy executives had a commitment to really doing good work, even though they didn't like what was all that was going on. They weren't just tanking it or just, oh, I'll show up, that'll be good enough. They were really committed to doing their sense of productivity and integrity. At the same time, these were not the people that was basically spending 20 hours a day and night at work, hoping that because, I'm so dedicated, top leadership will reward me, won't cut my job, won't, whatever. They realized, no, I've got to still find work-life balance. I've got to be with my friends, family. I can't just turn my whole life into, a 20-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
Second, they had a realistic sense of control. They knew things aren't going back to normal. We're not, even post-COVID, the work environment's going to be changed after all this. There's going to be a lot more teleworking. A lot of things are going to be different. So they had a realistic sense of control. I'm not going to be able to be lord or lady of my turf the way I was in the past.
Mm-hmm.
How did they get that realistic sense of control? They weren't afraid to deal with their feelings about change, to deal with the fear, to deal with the uncertainty, to say, hey, I need to talk to other people to kind of get a better sense of what's going on. They were more open minded. And fourth, so you had commitment, control, change. Now, most hardy execs also were getting what I call regular physical exercise or conditioning. They were really taking care of their mind and body through exercise, through, you know, realizing that stress is going to build. I need to find ways to de stress. Exercise is a great way of putting things in perspective. It releases chemicals that help us slow our minds down, get a different perspective, build up endurance. And of course, if you have an exercise buddy, then you're really beginning to get the benefits of both exercise, both emotional connection. So these were four just four things that leaders that did made a profound difference in how they managed this, you know, kind of disruptive crisis. And what are we in now? We're in a disruptive crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things both on a macro level that we've been talking about, leadership, building bubbles, building teams, having more, learning how to have more open communication with each other. But there's also the opportunity to build that inner sense of self, that greater psychological hardiness, being aware of, that crisis stirs up emotional memories as well as, the immediate, what am I going to do about this now? And it's that ability to integrate the inner and outer that's really going to help each of us not only survive this crisis, but there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth, that we're really going to develop new emotional muscles and new team muscles I remember my first week in basic training, the general said to all of us, it was like, all hands on deck meeting. He said, men, you will do things of which you never thought you were capable. And he was right. Let me tell you, from throwing hand grenades to getting gassed and, learning how to put on not your gas mask, soldier, it's your protective mask. I mean, it was just, he was right. It was a world that I entered that had no precedence for me.
Yes.
And it was scary, but it ultimately helped me. It really toughened me in the best sense of the word.
So we're out of time, but Aganze makes a great comment. It can be, if in the wrong hands, with a political agenda, you can use. We can use these adverse things, climate change, pandemics, and other things to attempt to control people. Aganze, I talk to about 300 students a month going through my management classes, and many of them are in your situation. Many of them are saying, I have totally no control over what's happening to me. And it's like a typhoon or a cyclone that I cannot control. And we're at the whims of the decisions of others. The best advice I can give those students is probably the advice I can give you, which is, it's very difficult to live in these environments when you're isolated. If there is a way to reach out and connect to people of a like mind, you don't have to fight these people, but what you can do is create an environment of safety where you can express your emotions safely, and also work together to build a strategy, not to fight, but to survive and eventually thrive. And that's where that's the true strength of humanity. We didn't conquer this planet because, we had big claws and big teeth. We conquered it because we walked our predators and our prey for 20 miles a day, often 3 or 4 days, and we just wore them out. And we can wear pandemics out, and we can wear good and bad leaders out too. And as a unified whole, as long as we work together, we can actually keep this conversation going, keep each other's spirits up, and we can actually, we don't know all the answers today, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but by creating this community and this sense of safety and outreach, we can continue this progress forward. And that's what I can offer you, and that's what I can offer the students. Thank you, Mark. It's a good conversation. Let's continue this in front of behind the camera, and we'll see where we're going to go with this. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have more questions. If you do, make them hard. Aganze, I really appreciate these difficult questions. This is what keeps me growing and looking for the difficult answers. And the problems are going to get more complex. But together, like I said, together, we may not have the solution today, but we have an opportunity, and we know how to work together. Staying transparent, being scared together, and bolstering each other up while we move forward across this planet.
I like to say amen and women to that.
Thanks again, everyone. Okay. Have a great time. I'll be back with Kumar hopefully next Tuesday. If not, we'll see you next Thursday. Enjoy yourselves. And reach out, please, if you can, to Ijona if you have more questions or comments. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.